Hey, I'm that topping dude. And there aren't really that many of us. You should be able to figure out which one I am. And that one, that one. Plus, it's not like that Jones dude or that Smith dude or that Davis dude. There aren't that many of us. That topping dude. Come on. Anyway, I'm that topping dude. This video is for writers. Whether you're amateur or professional, I just want to point something out. I'm old school, I'm a dinosaur, and I grew up differently than the generation in their 20s and 30s today, or even 40s, even 50s. Well, that's pretty close to me. When I grew up, we had to learn block letters and we learned cursive. And when we wrote, we used to write letters. We didn't have email when I was a kid. We wrote letters. And most of the time, when we wrote letters, we would write them out by hand. And I eventually got a typewriter, and then I learned how to type, and I started typing letters. And then when I grew up and became an adult, then the computers started coming around, and everyone had to learn computers. Then I started using a computer. People don't write much anymore. They don't write letters. They don't write by hand much. Which is, it all has its advantages and disadvantages. But one of the things I want to point out, which you might not know, or it might not have occurred to you, or you may not have found out on your own, is that when you write, whatever it is you write, but let's stay in the creative realm. Depending on what you write, it comes out differently. If you're a fast typist, then as your thoughts come through your head, you can type them out. Of course, now we have dictation, so you can dictate. But even when you're dictating, you're still, well, the way I dictate, I still say things like, "Dear that topping dude, comma, new line. This is a letter I am dictating to you, period. Just a reminder, comma, that I am you, comma, so you don't really need to read this because you will know what it says as soon as it arrives, period. New line, sincerely, new line, that topping dude." When formally dictating, you still have to put in all the quotation marks. It's not like when you're just improvising or just talking off the top of your head, and then you don't have to formulate your thoughts. You just talk. Writing on the computer, you can write faster on a computer than you can on an old school electric typewriter, or even in a manual typewriter that wasn't electric. I've typed on those. Those are hard. Those non-electric typewriters really took your focus away from what you were writing because you had to push those keys so fucking hard, like DEAR space THAT space TOPPING space DUDE comma zzz, and then you have to zzz, roll it back to the beginning. Then electric typewriters were much easier, like, oh, this is easy. But I did notice, because I started, before I learned how to type, I wrote a lot of letters. I used to write letters all the time. Getting a letter for me was an event, and they were fucking good letters I wrote. But I don't mean to brag too much. But I did notice that when I wrote by hand, my thoughts came out differently. And then, of course, it made sense because when you're typing, blah, 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 or on the computer, blah, 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 you're fast. I'm fast. And when I write, I'm slow. And because it takes longer for each word to come out, it formulates in your mind differently. You have more time to think about it as you're writing it, so more thoughts come. And because it's taking longer to write each word, you're thinking of ways to make it more concise. So writing the same, if you take, I don't know, a thought that you want to express, and you type it out and then you redo it at writing it longhand, it's going to be much different when you write it out. And you might want to do this as an exercise. Now, there is, there's a drawback. Your arm starts to hurt. And especially now, these days, that we're not used to doing it anymore. So, and it hurts my hand, not just my arm, but my hand. So I'm glad I can type pretty well, very well, as a matter of fact, because it just hurts my hand. But I wish it didn't, because my thoughts come out so much better when I write them out by hand. It's a different process. Your brain's going through a different process. Your body is going through a different process. And so what comes out of you is going to be different. In addition to how you write, whether you're typing or writing by hand, is the time you take to write. There's a famous quote. It's sometimes attributed to Mark Twain. And before doing this video, I went online to see if I could find out who actually said it. And the answer is, we don't know who actually said it. It's attributed to a lot of different people. So I don't know who it's correctly attributed to. Possibly Mark Twain. Sounds like he could have said it, something that he might have said. The line is, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. And what he means by that is, when you are writing just off the top of your head, you're writing out thoughts. You're writing extraneous stuff that you don't necessarily need to write. It doesn't mean it's bad writing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have written it. But you just write differently if you're taking the time. If you write slowly and think about the sentence, not just write it out, but think, how's the best way to say it? How can I say this a little better? So that in order to make it a shorter letter and a better, probably better letter, and a more concise letter, you need to think about it and phrase it differently. And even if you're typing, if you think about it more slowly, and don't just write it out. Don't just write out everything, the first thought that comes to your head. That's a great way to write if you're writing fast off the top of your head. I'm not saying never do that, but I am saying that the more time you take and really think about it, it's going to come out differently. Especially these days, people don't want to read. They hate reading, which is ironic because we have switched to texting. I never thought that texting would be the dominant form of communication that took over. Maybe if you're watching this a few years in the future, maybe it's already over. The texting thing is already... He's talking about texting! Oh my God! Do you know how many years ago that was that people were texting? Oh my God! Oh my God! And if you do want to do any either creative writing or a letter to a friend, and write it out instead of emailing it, or if you're writing a story, try writing it by hand instead of on the computer, because it's gonna be different. It has to be different, almost. But when you're writing, like for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, it's different. And if you've never done it, in particular if you've never done it, give it a try, because you might be amazed to see how different it is writing by hand than it is entering data, as it were. Just try it. God damn it, I said try it. It's fun, and you might even like it. You might even start doing it on a regular basis. Sincerely, that topping dude.